Hi, and welcome to the third 6 weeks curriculum collaboration for kindergarten. This 6 weeks will begin December 7th and last until January 29th. We'll be going over some curriculum standards, some upcoming assessments and DOLs, talking about some instructional pieces to highlight and so forth. So for kindergarten, we have three resources you can be using, and these are on campus or you have access to them online. That is your strategies for implementing guided math, and that's a binder on your campus, and then you have Oracle access. And then one new resource we have for you is the hands-on standards, and that is linked um, within the scope and sequence, and then also a bit.ly that we'll show later. So in Unit 3, we now have the same and different, and we're going to be going over analyzing 2D shapes, creating 2D shapes, and interpreting graphs. You'll notice some changes to the scope and sequence for mathematics. At the top, you won't see the weeks anymore. What we've done is taken those out and instead linked next to the bolded blue subtitles a more delineated, deconstructed trajectory of that topic. So if you're working on shapes and graphing, we've gone through and highlighted analyzing 2D shapes and how you might be able to approach that teaching wise and how many days to spend on that. Same thing for creating 2D shapes and interpreting graph. We've broken those up into their sections and to help you a bit more in planning a lesson around that. Also, you have your Origo there still, and so as you're using Origo and evaluating its effectiveness for that topic each day that you're using it, you can be using hands-on standards if there's something else you're needing, or if you already use that Origo lesson, there is the hands-on standard you can be using right then and there. So these blue pages right here on each topic are the student pages. The lessons are out of order because they're different sections of the book. The blue box is the teacher book. You click that, you can have access to it. These lessons are in different sections, and so when you go click on HOS Lesson 5 Sort by One Attribute, 126, it'll open up to the geometry section of this book, and you scroll down till you see Lesson 5, or in the teacher's book, page 126. That's how you can use it. Additionally, you have your teak specificities linked with the teaks right here. So K.8a, K6a. If you click those, you can get a lot of really great information as to how to instruct, how to assess, how to scaffold and build lessons or deconstruct those components of the teak, as well as get many graphics. We've not made these PDFs, those teak specificities on the teaks. We've not made them PDFs because there are a lot of great graphics in there that you can right-click, copy, and use in your classroom either as posters or in your lessons as you teach daily. So some changes, we've taken out those weeks, we've changed the subtitles to have those trajectories and delineated, deconstructed um, standards. We've added in the HOS Hands-on Standard TE, which is the box, the HOS Hands-on Standard Student Pages, which are the pages underneath, and also the DOLs. We've taken out those DOLs in the weeks, and we've added anywhere between 1 and 10 for each unit in there. So those can be used for mini assessments, formative, or for you to take them and piece them day by day and use them in your classroom. So those are some changes to the scope and sequence and curriculum overall. Now the first unit of 3, same and different, we'll be talking about analyzing shapes, 8 days. So this is about December 7th to December 16th. And within those 8 days, you can be using them to instruct and to be taking those DOLs and using those in your class. And so some of the standards you can be covering are K2B, always reading and writing those objects with and without pictures. K2C, counting sets. K6a, identifying shapes. K6c, identifying shapes and components of those 3D ones, making that connection. K6d, identifying attributes with various language uses. K6e, which is one of the readiness, is classifying, sorting those, and making sure we understand regular and irregular. K6f, and that's creating those shapes using a variety. K6f and K6e are very important because as we start getting older grades, and one of the heavy hitting techniques in 5th grade is composing and deconstructing those shapes from composite shapes. So making sure that our students understand formal language, informal language, regular and irregular, and how to sort shapes is imperative right now. You can see some of our vocabulary words include just counting, but then some very specific words as to identifying shapes and those attributes such as size, solid, properties, attributes, existence of, absence of, and then we have some of those actual shapes. We have line, segment, vertex, edges. Those kinds of words we're supposed to be using in class, making sure we say them. Some prior learnings from pre-K are that the shapes, that students would be able to identify shapes by feeling them, but without seeing them. Identify common shapes as always circle, square, rectangle, square, triangle. I said square twice. Attributes and common solids, and then also relating those shapes to real world objects, composing them and decomposing them. So some essential questions would be things as such: what attributes and properties exist in 2D figures such as circles, squares, rectangles, triangles? And remember, when we're talking about squares, all rectangles are squares, but not all squares are rectangles. So we need to make sure we differentiate and explicitly teach squares as special rectangles. How are attributes of circles and other 2D shapes alike and different? That's imperative when we start getting into 2D shapes and what is a polygon. Um, so if it's curved, it's not. If it's a straight edge all around, then it is. Why is a square considered a special type of rectangle? How can a collection of 2D figures be sorted and classified in more than one way? And so we can sort them with those very specific formal ways, size, shape, texture, or I'm sorry, shape, sides, and edges, or sort of informally with size, shape, and texture. Some identifying concepts that are some developing concepts we're working on are again just identifying those attributes of circles, triangles, rectangles, and again squares as spectral rectangles. And some misconceptions that your students may already have are that they may think irregular 2D figures have a different name than 2D figures. But remember, if it has four sides, it's a polygon. But it depends on if those sides are equal or if two sets are equal, it makes it a square rectangle. It's a pentagon if it has five sides, but it's irregular if all those sides are different. So making sure students understand that. Also, some students may think that orientation, size, texture, and color are those defining attributes of figures, um, when those are in reality informal ways to sort them. They are not really defining the shape. The next section of kindergarten would be still within the unit, December 17th to December 17th to January 13th. Same and different, but creating those 2D shapes. And you'll notice many of the standards, the vocabulary, and learnings we have are the same from previously because we're working with shapes. The first part is identifying and talking about them, analyzing them. Now we're going to be requiring students to create them. And so within this unit, as the previous one, we have one DOL, and that's the 2D shapes at the bottom, and that's linked in the unit guide. I'm sorry, that's linked in the scope and sequence. This might be used right here, or you can break it up piece by piece into both sections. But the big portion of this one is now creating those 2D shapes, composing them and decomposing them. We want students just to be as familiar and have as much fluidity in composing, decomposing shapes as they have with number fluency. So essential questions could be the same ones we had from the first section, but now we've added two. So what relationships exist between edges, which are sides, and corners, vertices in 2D figures? And then what strategies can be used to create those specific 2D shapes? When we're talking about edges and corners, those are words that our kids are most likely familiar with, those informal language structures. We want to be using those, but then also connecting and explicitly teaching those words that we want them to be using academically. So sides and vertices. So make sure you're making that explicit connection between the words they formally know and the academic vocabulary we want them to know going forward. Some concepts they're working on are still classifying those shapes on attributes, but now we're also creating them based on attributes. And again, the misconceptions are just about the same as before. The last portion of kindergarten for the third 6 weeks is going to be going over graphs, interpreting graphs. And so some of the standards we have there are, K6a counting, K6b representing, K6c sets of objects, cardinality beginning at one number and knowing that the last number I said starts going forward. So if I know that I have an object of 6, I can start 7, 8, 9. I don't have to start at the very beginning. And then again, identifying 2D shapes, counting 2D shapes, attributes, sorting them. And then the two new reporting readiness standards we added to this section are K8b and K8c. Use data to create those real object and picture graphs, and then draw conclusions from those graphs. Now I've included shapes or kept shapes here because we can sort and create graphs based on shapes. So if we're needing extra time or to bundle up some days to free up for additional instruction intervention, we can put shapes and those attributes with graphs and cut out a couple of days and use those elsewhere. Vocabulary, we have graph, organization, data, categorical data, categories, real object. Our students are going to be working with, I think, just two categories in graphs and making graphs from two different categorical data sets. Whereas in first grade, I think they do two and they do three sets. So making sure we're explicit about that, just using two sets of data. Representation, objects, conclusion, picture graph, value, horizontal, arrangement, vertical. It's imperative our kids know vertical, up and down, vertical, horizontal, sideways, because the way that we put information on a graph influences how we interpret that information. So some prior learnings from pre-K, if they went there, or that they sorted objects that were alike and different. They recognized that it can be divided into graphic representations, and they started to recognize patterns. There are no upcoming assessments, but we do have two DOLs that you can be using in this class or in this unit, and that is the data analysis and then data analysis part two. And again, those are located on the scope and sequence under DOLs right next to the topics. Essential questions for kindergarten for graphs would be, well, how does the purpose of the question aid in determining a reasonable way to collect data, store data, and then organize it? What are the parts of a real object graph and what are the parts of a picture graph? How do the title and category labels describe the data? What conclusions can be drawn? What questions can be answered? What is the purpose of an organized visual format and how does it aid us in our ability to draw conclusions and answer questions? And then how are real object graphs and picture graphs alike and different? And then some characteristics, and again, some more why is it important to display this information. Some developing concepts are that they are still organizing, sorting, classifying, collecting data into two categories, real object graphs and picture graphs. So we can do it by shapes, big and small, and then put them in graphs like that. And then also we can sort and we can do it to three categories also, and then creating those graphs and drawing conclusions. That might be the biggest portion of this, is understanding what information is represented right there for us. And you can go ahead and read through some of those misconceptions. Um, there are a lot for graphs, as it's probably a brand new thing for students in kindergarten. Some resources for you, as always, we have our curriculum frameworks, instructional calendar, scope and sequence. You no longer have unit guides, but within the scope and sequence, we have those trajectories right there for you. You have your Origo books, you have hands-on standards and path blazers, and then for additional resources, the hands-on standards books and some video tutorials, you can go to bit.ly/LM resources, find your grade level, and use anything in there you like. Additionally, for Pathblazer, we have some upcoming webinars. We have upcoming office hours with the Pathblazer representative, Haley Wallace. All those links can be found on our Math Google website, and you can find that at bit.ly//FWIC math, or go to our mathematics website, and then to the left in that column it says Google site. You click the picture and you have it right there. There are there are webinars for each region if you haven't already gone. And then starting, I think, November 12th or so, we're going to be having those open office hours, and they are all listed right there. You can't click in the PowerPoint to it, but go to our website or contact your administration, and you'll be able to get the link to go ask those questions. And you can always reach out to your team supports, your regional supports. So Region 1 would be me, John Reed. Region 2, Adam Gutierrez. Region 3, Mrs. Kenyelle Carr. Region 4, Mrs. Luana Jones. Thank you for the collaboration. We'll see you soon.